Well, a good Monday to you. Welcome to another edition of Monday Motions, where we attempt to live our lives intentionally, the lives that we're given, rather than just going through the motions. So I was in China. I was super lucky to be able to travel there for a couple weeks, probably 10, 15 years ago now. And it was just unbelievable, kind of once in a lifetime experience, traveling through these ancient cities and walking on the Great Wall, eating crazy food, all kinds of interesting things. But one of the things that kind of stuck out to me as the trip went along was I kept getting ripped off. And the way people did this was that the Chinese currency, at least back then, I think it's still the same. They have bills like 5, 10, 15, whatever different increments of bills, like that would be equivalent to our dollar. But at the same time, they had a couple of those smaller, like 2, 5, 10, that would have been cents. So you could have a $2 bill or a 2-cent bill, and it just had a 2 on there. And it was hard to be able to tell which was which if you were a foreigner, and they took advantage of people because of that. So imagine that you give them $10, you're owed $8 of change back, and they give you 8 cents essentially. So that was happening. I knew what was going on, and I'm like, man, these people live under oppression and the communist rule there in the country, and on top of that, they're just poverty stricken. And I'm thinking, if they're going to rip me off for a couple cents, essentially, I mean, fractions of a cent probably in American currency, if I'm getting ripped off, sure, it still matters, the principle, but, they're poor, whatever. I'm not going to ruin my day over it. So I went along, people give me change back, happen, not every time, but relatively regularly. And so that just keeps going on and on and on, and I'm fine. I'm doing great. And I actually kind of felt good about myself, honestly, to be fully clear about that. I kind of felt like a little bit superior in a sense, like, I'm a good guy, I'm not getting mad about this like some people would. And then it happened. I had been on an overnight train ride from the inland of China back to Beijing, and I got back to Beijing probably 5:30 in the morning, maybe 6 at the latest. It was very early, and it was so cold. It was early January, freezing cold winters in northern China where I was at. So get out of the train, into the train station, looking for some place to warm up, get some breakfast, something warm to drink. Nothing's open except for Kentucky Fried Chicken. And believe it or not, that's one of the most pervasive American restaurants around the world, I've found, kind of to my own shock. But anyway, I go to this Kentucky Fried Chicken to get a breakfast sandwich and something warm to drink, or whatever they've got. And I go through the order the things, they tell me the price, I gave them the bills, and the same thing happens again. They hand me back, it was, I think, a 2-cent bill rather than a $2 bill. I took my food, went, sat down, and I knew what had happened. And for some reason, it was just too much this time. I was tired. I was worn out. It was near the end of the trip. I was cold. My sense of justice overtook my sense of compassion. And I just was like, done. I'm like, I'm not going to keep taking this. This is ridiculous. So I go back up to the counter, get the girl's attention that had taken my order and give them my change back. I'm like, I want my change. This isn't the right change. I want my change back. She's like, no, sir, I'm sorry. That's your change. Like, nah, don't insult my intelligence. Just give me my change. And she was just like kind of held to the line, and I started to get belligerent. I wasn't screaming or anything, but I was clearly upset, and people started to get uncomfortable. The manager came over then like, oh, sir, no, that's your change. That's the correct change. And I was just super mad. I even might have said some words that I would be embarrassed if you heard them, but I was mad. I wasn't screaming, like I said, but I was upset. And I lost composure, and I just was like, give me my money. Like, you stupid crooks, give me my money. Like, this is ridiculous. And the lady just held her line. Nope, that's your change. And I had this flash of insight, inspiration, probably not from God, but it seemed like it came from outside somewhere. Suddenly, I just had this idea. I looked up at the board, and I'm like, oh, so this is a $2 bill. Yes, sir, that's a $2 bill. I looked up, and a cup of coffee cost, I think it was $1. I don't know. So I was like, then give me a cup of coffee. She was like, okay. And I could see the confusion in their eyes, like, oh no, where is this going? And she rung it up, and she's like, that'll be $1. So I slid the 2-cent bill right across the table to them. I'm like, good, then that will cover the cost. I want $1 back. And they're like, oh, okay, yes, sir. She pulled out the bill, the right one, gave me $1, took my coffee and went and sat back down. The whole restaurant was silent. And I was like, I won, right? These are one of those checkmate moments where you're like, you want to have the right thing to say, the tricky move in the right moment. And I had it. I just like nailed these ladies in the KFC early morning Beijing restaurant. And it might not come to you as a shock, but I didn't feel very proud of that moment within about a fraction of a second. And I was just like, oh, man, I mean, I did so well just kind of just living my life and not giving people what they were giving me. And then I lost it. And not only did I reflect it back, I did it in this like super abrasive, typical American way, at least what they see as typical aggressive Americans, right? I definitely wasn't breaking any stereotypes. Have you ever found in your life that we as humans tend to reflect what we're given? When people treat us well, we don't have a hard time treating them kindly. When people are disrespectful to us, even if we're generally respectful people, we tend to give back what they gave to us. But when you read in the scriptures, you see people that didn't do that. And you might know people in your family or in your workplace or in your friendship group or your neighborhood that you watch that they don't reflect what they're given. They rise above it, right? Think of Daniel. The guy is like taken from his home and not to be crass, but I mean, he's castrated by this conquering army. And just the worst things happen. And people, are trying to demean him and undercut him. And all the while, he never breaks. He responds with just faithfulness, doing his job and following his God. Joseph, I mean, one of the worst stories you can imagine. And yet he transcends it, doesn't he? He's not giving back what he's given. He lives so far above what is given him that most of us can't even imagine doing that. And of course, there's the story in the life of Jesus himself. So how do we do that? How do we rise above what we're given? Because at the end of the day, that's what we all want to do, don't we? We don't want to just react to our surroundings. We don't want to just respond to the negativity we're given as if we're a mirror with no control of what shines on us. We just reflect what stands in front of us. I think the answer comes when we look at this little piece of nature, the water lily, right? It's this thing that's so beautiful. It stands for purity in a lot of people's thinking, this just beautiful, perfect lily. And yet, if you've noticed, they can grow in some of the nastiest environments, can't they? And we look at them and they're just this beautiful, perfect thing growing in filth and garbage, and yet they aren't affected by it. And the reason for that is that they do not pull in their nutrients from that water. Their roots drop down deep into soil and grow down deep to where there is health and nutrients, and they soak those up. Because they are pulling something from somewhere else, they do not end up transformed by their environment. They transform their environment by adding beauty. So where are you finding nourishment today? If you're not finding nourishment outside your environment, especially if it's negative, stressful, overwhelming to you, you're just going to start to reflect that. Not because you're weak or evil, but because you're human. That's the way it goes. Where are you pulling your nutrition from? Ultimately, I would hope that we could all say from God, right? That we would pray and that we would read our scriptures and that we would stay connected to that source of ultimate life. And yet the Bible says that God himself said it's not good for man to be alone. He doesn't expect us to get everything from him in the sense that he's put beautiful things in the world through food. We get nutrition from food, right? We get water to keep us alive. And the same thing goes with our own spiritual and emotional health. When we find ourselves in rough situations, stressful situations, it's so important to find those ways that we can dig in deep and get nutrition, right? So we're not just reflecting what's around us, calling friends that lift us up, going on a walk, gardening, going on a drive. I mean, whatever you find that works for you, beyond those kind of pat answers that we give, prayer, reading scriptures, do those. I'm not undermining those even remotely. And yet sometimes we need something even beyond those because God created the world that way. To where you could call up a friend and say, listen, I don't have what I need right now. I'm just starting to reflect the stress and anxiety and anger around me. I want to transcend that. And that you'd send your roots out into those things that God has put into your life. What is it? Where are you getting your nutrition? What are you reflecting right now? As you begin this week, may you take a moment to ponder that question and to make sure that you're digging deep into your connection with Christ, but also to look for the ways that he's provided for you through friendships, through exercise, through recreation, whatever it might be, and find ways that you can send your roots down deep so that even in the midst of frustration and toxic life, that you would not be changed by it, but you would add beauty, that you would reflect what you're given because you're getting something beautiful from somewhere outside that environment, and that environment would be blessed because of that.